Welcome. Today is the 18th of Av and the 22nd of August. We're going to be looking at the fifth reading of Parshat Eikev, starting in Deuteronomy chapter 12, verse 12, and finishing in chapter 13. Did I say chapter 10? Chapter 10, verse 12, and finishing in chapter 11, verse 9. Okay. There are two main topics here that we want to discuss. The first one is fearing God, what it means to fear God, how it's possible to come to awe of God, fear of God. And the second one is the commandment to love the convert. Okay, so let's start. Verse 12 in chapter 10 reads, "And now Israel, what does God demand of you? Only to revere God," meaning to fear God, or to be in awe of God, "to walk in all His ways, to love Him, and to serve Havaya your God with all your heart and with all your soul." So this is very similar to what we have in the Shema, to love God with all of your heart and with all of your soul. But here it says to worship God, to serve God. But we want to focus on the words, what does Havaya your God demand of you? Now, in English it doesn't sound exactly the way it does in Hebrew. It's very hard to capture it, I think. But what this is really saying is, it's like I would say to someone, what am I asking of you? All I'm asking of you is to do so-and-so. All I wanted you to do was clean your room. That was it. That's all I wanted. That's what it sounds like in Hebrew. It's like God is saying to the people, Moses is saying to the people in the name of God, what did I want from you? All I demand of you, all I want from you is to fear God. And the sages immediately question this. And they say, how can you say that this is an insignificant small thing, that you would say, all I've asked of you is to fear God? To fear God is a tremendously difficult thing. Why? Let's try to explain it, and we're going to fall back on a lot of what we have from the Baal Shem Tov, who explained this way. Before his father passed away, the Baal Shem Tov was 5 years old, and his mother had already passed on, and he was now a 5-year-old child whose father was on his deathbed. And the father of the Baal Shem Tov, Rabbi Eliezer, he said to him, we're talking about the Baal Shem Tov, we're talking about the year about 1605, sorry, that was wrong, 1705 in Europe. And he's about to become an orphan, and his father gives him what is called the will, like what he wants from him. He's giving him something to go by his whole life. What is he going to say to him? So he says to him two things. He says, Yisrael was his name, Yisrael Baal Shem Tov, you should fear only God, fear nothing else in this world, only God, and love every Jew without regard to his station in life. There's a lot to say about these words. And the Baal Shem Tov carried this with him, and he saw it in a certain sense as an encapsulation of his whole method. What does it mean to fear only God? Why did he say that? Why didn't he say like the way that the verse here says, God demands of you to fear Him? Because human beings are full of fear. We're full of things that we are afraid of. That's just human nature. And so to only fear God is actually to suppress, and as we'll see in a moment, actually unite all the fears into one essential fear. It means that if I fear anything but God, I don't yet understand God's all-encompassing nature. For instance, if I'm afraid of a sickness, if I'm afraid of a war, if I'm afraid of a terrorist attack, if I'm afraid of losing my house, if I'm afraid of this, that, or the other thing, then I don't fear God. To fear God is to take all these lower fears, smaller fears, Some of them which may actually be very rational, because there is always risk of certain things. To take that, and not to say have no fear. That's not true. And it's not true what Kennedy said, the only thing we need to, I think it was Kennedy, the only thing we need to fear is fear itself. It's not true. Man has fears. People have fears.
Eleanor Roosevelt.
Thank you. So, it's not that you can get rid of your fears entirely. You just have to make sure that you're fearing the right thing. That your fear is only of God, not of anything else. Everything else is a twice removed or thrice removed power of God. So if I'm afraid of losing my house, it may be a rational fear even, but the point is I need to fear God, which means I can actually do something about it. What do I need to do? If I'm only afraid of losing my house, maybe I'll try to get a bigger, pay more of my mortgage, or I don't know what. But if my fear is of God, so I know that it all depends not on how big my mortgage is, how much I owe, or what situation, what the weather is like, or anything like that. It has everything to do with my relationship with God. And everything else is a derivative of that. So to fear only God means to get rid of all the other fears, not by saying they're irrational, they don't count, and so on, but rather by connecting them back to the source and saying that all fears are actually fears of God. That's what I have to have in me. Now that is not easy to do. It's not easy to do at all. So, said the Baal Shem Tov, we have to take this verse here and ask, so what do we do with this? How can the Torah say that this is a small thing that God is asking? The sages already asked this question in the Talmud, and they come up with the following formulation. They say, why didn't God say this himself? Why is it that Moses is saying this in the name of God? The answer is because for Moses, it is a small thing to only fear God. For him it is easy. Why? Because for him all the fears coalesce into one, and he only sees God above him. But that's Moses. Say the sages, so you should be the same way, because it's easy for Moses, it should be easy for you. So that's what the Talmud says, and that's a little bit hard to understand also, because I'm not Moses. I don't have that. So what have you helped me by telling me that I should be like Moses? So in the Tanya, for instance, he says that we all have a part of Moses within us, because the Torah is universal. Moses is the giver of the Torah. So there's a part of the Torah of Moses in every one of us, the part that receives the Torah. We all have a spark of Moses within us. There's even a song now that I hear my children listening to. I don't know what it's called. Maybe somebody can write it down in the chat. It's like one of these modern Hasidic things that came out of Crown Heights. There's a little bit of Moses in me, or something like that. That's what the Tanya says. The Baal Shem Tov says it a little bit differently. He says like this, that really it's a two-step process. It's a two-stage process. You really can't come directly to fearing just God. You have to first fear Moses. What does it mean to fear Moses? I've never seen Moses. So he says, I don't mean Moses. I mean the extension of Moses into each generation. There is a person in each generation who is the extension of Moses' soul into that generation. He is the leader of the generation. If you come to have a relationship with him, and you should be able to because he's in your generation, and you see how great he is, how exalted he is, how different from everyone else he is, you begin to understand and you begin to fear him. Not to fear him because he can hurt you or anything like that. We're talking here about fear that is like awe. To hold him in tremendously high esteem. If you can do that, then it's easy to come to hold God in the proper awe, the proper esteem. It's a two-stage process. How do we learn this? Says the Baal Shem Tov, because there's another place where God said that we should fear him, and there the verse is, Et Hashem Elokecha Tira. You should fear Hashem your God, Havaya your God. But the verse starts with a word which in English has no translation. It means et. Et, sorry, it doesn't mean et. It's et. And it means something like to. To Havaya, your God, you should fear. Or it's some kind of, it's again, there's no translation into English, but it's like a conjunctive word that says there's something else here. And the sages say, what is this et doing here? You should only fear God. Why should there be an et here? They say really because you should also fear the sages. You should also fear the people who are the extension of Moses and every generation. The fear starts from there. So really what do we have here? That first you have to fear them, then you can come to fear God. And this is the order. In other words, if you don't know who the leader of the generation is, it's very hard to come to fearing God. And that's what this is saying. Now, we also mentioned that there's another commandment here. There's a lot here in this reading. But the very end of the reading, he tells us that you should love the convert. Sorry, not the end, but verse 19. V'avtem et hager, ki gerim heitem be'eretz Mitzrayim. You should love the convert. And here it's a question whether the convert here is someone who is a convert to Judaism entirely, or whether he is just someone who is a sojourner, someone who is permitted to live in the land of Israel because he's rejected all forms of avodah zarah. Avodah zarah is usually translated as idolatry, but idolatry gives us a sense of some kind of molten, some kind of idol that somebody formed. It's not only that; it's much wider than that. But it means that this person has rejected it entirely. For instance, there are many authorities in Jewish law that say that Christianity is not idolatry, despite the fact that they worship Jesus. It's forbidden for a Jew, but for them it's what's called having shituf. Shituf, and this is a delicate topic, but it means that they believe in one God, but they've added something to him. They've sort of latched something on. And so they have a belief in one God, and they also believe in something else. And that's a problem for a Jew. A Jew is not allowed to believe something like that. But it doesn't necessarily make a non-Jew into an idolater. It doesn't necessarily make them. There's a big dispute about this. It's a very big topic. But a person who's allowed to live in the land of Israel is someone who's even refuted that. He says, I believe only in one God. I'm not a Jew yet. That's a sojourner. He's not a convert. But he does believe that there's only one God. And he takes upon himself the 7 Noahide laws. The most important of which in our generation is without question to not murder. Unfortunately, many of the non-Jews that live in the land of Israel today are Muslims who, on the one hand, seem to be very strong in their monotheism, that they only believe in one God. They're not willing to add any kind of additional faith to it. However, they're very, very problematic when it comes to do not murder and to do not steal. But mostly the first one. We know what the issue is. And so a person like that should not be allowed, according to the Torah, to live in the land of Israel when we have the power to prevent them from doing so. So the road to citizenship in any kind of Jewish state has to include that the non-Jew can become a citizen, but he has to sign, he has to proclaim that he follows the 7 Noahide laws, and then he can live here. In any case, says the Torah that you must love this, either the convert or the sojourner. It really includes both. And the idea is that when a person becomes a convert to Judaism, he's doubly loved by God and hopefully by all Jews. The reason is because we have one commandment, love your fellow as you love yourself, ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, and we have another commandment, ve'avtem et hager. You should love the ger. You should love the person who's converted. So he's doubly loved. And that is a very important thing to know, that when a person decides to convert to Judaism, at least officially, the stance is that he's given twice as much love as any innately born Jew. And, says the Torah, for a very good reason. For you yourselves were aliens in Egypt. For you yourself were sojourners in Egypt. Whether you're a convert or you're a sojourner, it doesn't matter. You feel like a foreigner. There is a long process of assimilating into the culture, and for most people it doesn't end with them. And this is something that converts need to know. It's almost impossible for a person to truly become, in one generation, so assimilated into Judaism that you can't tell. I know a few people that are, but it's a minority among the converts. Most of the converts are always struggling with their identity still. It's not so simple. But the hope is, and this is the main idea, is that their children who will already be born as Jews or will convert at a younger age, they will already have taken on Judaism innately. And so they become part of the people and nobody knows the difference anymore. But in order to pave the way for the convert, the Torah says you must love the convert and love him doubly much as you love every Jew. So thanks for joining today. I hope we're able to see each other tomorrow again in good health. All the best to everyone.